Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is January 17, 2023. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Cary, Harrison. Where in the heck you calling in from, Cary?
Today, I am in Tampa Bay, Florida, where it is 71 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudless and flawless. So I think LA is not enjoying that same weather today.
How cool is that? The first question, Cary, is what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being, I guess, would be inner peace, because without any of that or a sense of safety, you can't do anything in the world competently or capably, because you're self-editing, you're freaking out, you're grabbing more than is your fair portion only because you need to survive. So whatever the mechanisms are to feel safe and secure, then you could do the other stuff. Maslow's hierarchy, food, water, shelter, art, science, music, keeps going all the way up. But if you can't eat and don't have a place to live and don't have it pulled together, well, pushing people to be like that, come on, pull yourself up. Well, if I'm not going to help you pull, it's a hell of an ask, isn't it?
Dude, you are a wordsmith, really well with words. I appreciate how articulate you are, Cary. So the next question is, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I am no stranger to technology, which is the way. Anybody that says they read the newspaper is lying to you. First of all, what's a newspaper? Where do you get one? I get a news pamphlet, which would be formerly known as the newspaper, which is advertising and not much in there. So we're all reduced now to electronic media, like it or not. A lot of people ask me constantly, where do I go to find real news? And it's a question we ask of each other, isn't it, Jerry?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, where do you go for real news? So basically you go abroad. It sounds cynical. I'm not trying to be sarcastic here, but our domestic media has fired, more deliciously referred to as laid off, removed, retired the position. You can make it sound elegant as hell, but they have fired people that actually drew real salaries, and their jobs were to be sitting in on Capitol Hill and follow the politics that were going on there and report to you so that you would know what your representatives were up to. The reason we have guys like George Santos, this magical Republican candidate who has lied 1,000 times over, and even more lies, is that we no longer have paid people who are supposed to fact check and report on people on Capitol Hill. So you can't know that George Santos is, the guy's even gay and in the Republican Party. I mean, it's like he's got it all happening here. So where do you go?
Well, Cary, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
We've always done this, haven't we? Since we sat around in caves. Look at the pictographs that are 30, 40, 50, 70,000 years old drawing elk. It's storytelling. It's letting your next guy know what's around the corner so he can avoid it or purchase it in whatever early forms of capitalism there were. But storytelling is how we bond. If we all sat around in a cave in front of a fire and didn't say anything, might be a great Star Trek episode, but ain't nobody going to evolve or grow, learn about anything. Humans are the only creature in the world that needs to be taught how to breed.
Yeah.
You got
conscious breathing. That's good. Conscious breathing. So that's really
I said breed with a D.
Oh, breed.
Yeah, we actually don't know what
to hear breathe.
We actually don't know how to do it until we're taught.
That's good. We're
the only ones. So we need to be able to talk around the fire.
Sorry about that miss here. So
okay, you were being clean. I was being inappropriate and prurient.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think mishearing can lead to epiphanies sometimes. So you clarified that. Fill in the blank, Cary. I don't know what I think until I
don't know what I think until I articulate it.
Nice.
Well, it's just true. So what I think can be turned into action often.
Yeah.
And that is a form of articulation. So it would be nonverbal. So once it materializes my thoughts, the exercise that a lot of us have is to examine the thoughts before you do something with them. In other words, pause, count to 10, whatever the stuff has been going on for hundreds of years, these great adages and axioms. But a thought is not inherently bad. It's a thought where I'm overreaching. That's where I get in trouble, where I feel entitled to something that is yours or this kind of thing. And then I go for it. So I think one of the benefits of getting older, as you can see, I'm 25, but one of the benefits of getting, I'm totally kidding there. One of the benefits of getting older is you have enough history of, I know what's going to happen if I fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And this is why we educate younger people, is because they can't know because they haven't done it. That's why you get all these pain in the ass older people saying, let me tell you, in 10 years, or if you do that, we're just trying to help, honestly, save you 5 years of hell or jail time, because we know actually how that turns out. And that's the benefit of getting older. And then the parts break down. So you can't have it all.
Can humans think without language?
Yeah, I think so. I have been dreaming a lot lately, voluptuous dreams, sometimes naughty, sometimes like a James Bond movie. And I know that there's language in them, but a lot of it is just action. It's just stuff happening. So the stuff is a form of language. Like I know what it means when a car comes at me. I don't have to be told at precisely this velocity, the object moving with inertia. No, I know what it looks like. I know what it means. So it's not verbal language, and it's not a word that's printed or spoken, but it is a form of visual communication that is, in fact, language.
Very good. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Cary, what do you do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Oh, you mean like living in 2023?
Yes.
Well, so not to get too esoteric, because not everyone has the benefit of different kinds of education. So a lot of this is helping people know what we mean by that, like referencing Chomsky. There could be 90% of people going, I have no idea what a Chomsky is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of, I think, more now we have to start explaining references, because back when you were a kid, Jerry, it wasn't that far back, but it was back a little bit. Yeah. There was something called the Encyclopedia Britannica. You probably remember it.
I used it.
Nice people had a whole wall of those things in their house because not nice people sold them to them. But the point is that if it was knowable, worth knowing, it was printed and published in the Encyclopedia Britannica, or the World Book, whatever it was called. Yeah. If it wasn't important and relevant, it physically wasn't in there. So the limit of your knowledge was printed in books by someone who decided it ought to go in there, it ought to not go in there. That was it. People did not know stuff beyond those books. Now, you can know everything. Is it true what you know? Hell no. There's no editor-in-chief of the internet. Anybody can do a blog as long as it looks good. It's believable. It looks real. And hey, it's just madness and crazy land. So yeah, people are full of all kinds of fake knowledge, bullshit, hypotheses. It's all just complete mayhem. The World Book, at least, was sober, and it tried to be accurate. And it gets back to your kind of initial question. Where do you go to find out what's true or not? I'm a fan of Al Jazeera, which is, well, let's just admit it's the worst brand in the world. If you're going to name a news organization in America and run it in America, Al Jazeera is probably the worst thing you can call it, especially with Arabic lettering.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about politically incorrect and we're not being good. No, it sucks. It just, people don't get it. They're not going to get it. And so change it. However, they do a good job. Why? Because they actually have to really step it up to be fair and balanced and neutral. Not like Fox, but for real, because their brand screams the Emir of Qatar, screams no human rights, screams slavery and death to 3,500 people building the recent soccer stadium we all enjoyed watching the World Cup at, screams bad behavior everywhere. So his news has to be squeaky clean, and they pull it off.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid. Al Jazeera came from, once upon a time, there was a guy named Al Gore. We probably all remember him as the vice president. And then he decided to compete with MSNBC after MSNBC blew out Keith Olbermann. This was some years ago. Keith Olbermann was the big superstar before Rachel Maddow took the baton and became the everything. And when they blew him out, he's sitting around worth a lot of money and had a big fan base and no home. So Al Gore had started this cable TV channel called Current that was seriously ahead of its time because he understood that they were kids. They were 11, 12, I don't know, 15 on there doing tiny little news stories, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes tops, and figured that was the attention span of them. And the whole world looked and laughed and said, oh my God, the future is dead if people can't spend more than 5 minutes. Well, he was onto something. And nobody watched it, and it was not well done. However, to compete with MSNBC, Al Gore owned a channel on every cable system, every satellite system, whether it's Time Warner, DirecTV, Dish, didn't matter. He had this channel, and it had low bandwidth, and nobody was watching it. So he converted it into the same name, Current, but suddenly throws on Keith Olbermann and throws on Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks, TYT, throws on the former governor of Michigan, throws on all these different people. And it actually steals the audience from MSNBC. It was a win. So much so that it built such cum is a radio term for cumulative audience, that Al Gore was able to flip it and sell it to the Emir of Qatar, who owned Al Jazeera. And overnight, Current went away. Everyone got fired. And it became Al Jazeera on every network, every cable company, every satellite dish. And within a week, it existed nowhere. That brand again. Killed it. So you can now get them streaming online. You can get it if you have an Amazon Fire Stick, which I like. I don't like Roku. Roku is a closed system. It's like Apple.
Yeah.
They keep you in. You can't break in. You can't get out. And so you watch what they decide you get to watch and for how much. I like the Amazon Fire Stick, not because I like Jeff Bezos, but I like the fact it runs on Google, the Google platform, open sourced. So there is nothing that you can't actually put on that and nothing that you can't actually get. And Al Jazeera is free. So that's another one.
Well, really good, Cary. Let's keep going on some of these basic philosophical questions, and we'll dive deeper into your professionalism.
I get intoxicated on this stuff.
No, dude, I'm learning a lot, and I'm really gloriously happy that you're teaching me. But just a couple more on philosophical and your background, and then we'll just dive deep into your main subject. And I'm really anxious to learn more. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings? I know it's a stupid question and it depends, but just a sort of overall prompt. How do you feel about that question? Are we more feeling or more thinking beings?
Well, we're feeling creatures first.
Yeah.
And then we translate the feeling into, fear, which is face everything and respond, or can I say a naughty word?
Sure.
Maybe not. And fuck everything and run.
Yeah.
Fear stands for whatever it means, but we're just a chemical vat of feelings and responses. Then we turn it into thoughts. And that's when we go back to what you were saying earlier, Jerry, about what do we do with those thoughts? Do you execute them or do you evaluate them? And we're not trained in this country to evaluate our thoughts. We're trained to stand your ground, hold your gun, and whatever you think is right. And no matter what, never say you're wrong or apologize. So we're back to Miss Manners again, too.
Yeah. Well, do thoughts create emotions?
Yes, thoughts can create emotions, but your thought is based on a feeling you're having originally. So you're not meditating into nothingness like a great Zen Buddhist, and you have a meaningless thought and then suddenly you have a panic attack. I mean, it could happen, but most people don't live in Malibu and have that luxury, frankly.
Yeah.
So it kind of works the other way around.
Yeah. The two questions Alan Turing asked in the 50s. First one, is thinking a function of the soul?
I'm not, that's over my pay grade. The soul.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the second Turing question.
Okay.
Can machines think?
Yeah, they can think. In fact, that's what they do. They think based on their programming and they execute whatever they're instructed to do. Then we have AI, artificial learning, which is not a stranger to any of us anymore. Even if you call the phone company or any company, it's all AI now, these voice response units.
Yeah.
So they're thinking. Can they have original thought? Well, that's where the artificial learning becomes scary.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're here to do, is invent new questions and push these wordings of mine farther and reword them. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Probably meaning. Meaning gives me comfort. Happiness I can have watching Netflix or eating inappropriate amounts of ice cream. Yeah.
I love your sense of humor, Cary.
Yeah.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I guess it's your relationship with meaning that creates the consciousness. If something doesn't mean something, I don't care about it. Example, you've had okra before, maybe in gumbo. Do you know what okra is?
Yes. Oh, yeah, indeed. Yeah. I've eaten it.
I hate it.
Yeah.
It's a slimy, vile green thing. It ought to be illegal, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But a lot of people eat it. So when I go in the grocery store by the frozen section and I see a bag of frozen okra, I don't even spot it. It's not even, it doesn't come up on my radar because it means nothing to me. It has no meaning. So I'm not conscious of it. But if I saw, I know this is going to shock you, frozen rhubarb.
Yeah.
I would buy that and then find somebody willing to bake me a pie.
Nice. Yeah. Strawberry rhubarb pie.
Yes.
Well, what's faster, Cary, the speed of light or speed of thought?
I don't know what the speed of thought is. I do know what the speed of light is. As far as I know, I don't know the speed of thoughts. My thoughts can be very sluggish. But I guess when you're driving a car and something happens and you just hit that brake before you even know your leg moved, I mean, I guess maybe that's kind of the speed of thought, but I don't know.
That's all right. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and says, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
I'm not sure I get the question. I love
it.
Well,
it's here's how I open some of these questions with cue quotes. The basic question is what tool do you gravitate towards? You can apply the word new if you want, and you could apply the quote, because Audre Lorde is a poet, so it might be metaphorical. She's saying you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Well, that's an interesting thing. Like Lakoff says, you got to use the existing tools and invent new ones. So the basic question is, like all my questions, you put them in the context you want, is what tool do you gravitate towards? And if you want to apply the word new, go ahead. And if you want to apply it to dismantling the master's house, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I like George Lakoff, but I don't, and he didn't say this, but before that, I don't necessarily agree that you cannot dismantle the master's house with his own tools. This is not Einstein saying you can't solve a problem with the same brain that caused it. You can dismantle the master's house with his own tools, for sure, because you know how it was built. I think a lot of us are hardwired differently, and I'll give you an example. I'm kind of an A-type personality. Doesn't mean I'm an A+ performer. It just means I'm wired. Like I'm ready to go all the time. And some people are just really chill. And if I had to stimulate and stoke them to go do what I want to do, they would be miserable. Likewise, if I were to sit around all day and just whatever with them, I would be I'd be antsy, you know? I require mental stimulation to be eroticized. Like I can't date if there's no content. Sure, a good-looking body, a great set of chops, all that stuff. Yeah, it works. Mechanically, it all works. It's great. But I can't fall in love with someone that does not have good, dynamic content. So I'm a content guy. Other people are not.
Yeah. So what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I actually try not to. This is not a cop out on your question.
No, that's good. That's all the power to you, man.
But if I worry at night, I am not going to sleep. I am my brain is so magnificently voluped. I start, and then when they say this, I'm going to say that. You do it too, I'm sure, Jerry. The shower is the most dangerous spot for those kind of sword fights, by the way. So
here's,
yeah.
Go ahead. Let's get into it now. This is Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. And you know, by artists, I mean newscasters, painters, poets, musicians. They're the antenna of the race, your medium, radio. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Cary, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, we have egos. Who wants to admit they fucked up? Who wants to admit it could have been done better? I mean, it's fine if it could have been done better if you can just do it better in secret and then claim the golden booty at the end. But if somebody points and says, you know, that's really a D+, nobody wants to admit that. So we just we'll let it go away and maybe move on to the next invention.
Do artists have moral obligation?
I think so.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I would think old ideas that are dangerous. There are old ideas that are good, but there are a lot of old ideas that people bring up because nobody's heard of them before, and, you know, repackage it as some kind of moral truth that we've all been just overlooking all this time, and we need to like get back into lockstep with that. So that's where I'm seeing the big problems are today.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yeah, one of my earliest memories was in this house, the first house I ever lived in. So I'm probably 3, maybe 2.5. and I'm hiding for my life in a closet because my parents are going crazy. And my mother was a cross between Mommy Dearest and Cruella de Vil on a good day.
Wow. I don't mean to laugh, but you know what yeah.
I totally appreciate it.
Yeah.
And my father, was, he liked to drink.
Yeah.
He wasn't the undershirt wife beater guy, but he was just, more like the lion tamer with the whip and the chair. Not physical, but just verbally abusive. It's not even the word, but just let's just say they weren't in love. So they were going at it. And I knew that if I had been in the middle, I would have been toast, because neither of them had the automatic governing system saying protect the child. They didn't view the children as being protection worthy. They viewed them as objects that had to be fed like little birds and irritants and time suckers. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with that history, but hopefully more of us don't have that history so that we can have a decent human race in the future.
Beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I guess it depends on your memories. Someday, if I have dementia, I'm sure it'll be a blessing, because from what I understand, it's great.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Within the immediate family. I think it was my father.
What'd you get mainly from your dad? What do you think?
What I got from him is a kind of interesting swagger, and it's just WASP manners. Not everyone knows what a WASP is, but it's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It doesn't mean anything on the West Coast. It means a lot on the East Coast. It means a lot in the Midwest. And you're trained when you come out of the womb to stick out your hand and introduce yourself. So when you walk in a room at a party, you don't like get small and lurk in the corner and feel like shit and want to do anything to have Scotty beam you out of there, which is what a lot of us want to do. But you learn these tricks because they're survival techniques.
Yeah.
The second you walk in a room, you stick your hand out and introduce yourself, and it disempowers all the other people in the room. And you're no longer this vulnerable object in the corner. And so you can walk around the room freely, come and go as you want. These are the things that he taught me that are just based in hundreds of years of tradition that really have been helpful. If you want your hand shaken, you got to stick it out. I mean,
how about, now that was good. Very articulate, Cary. I appreciate this. How about outside your immediate family? Someone who had an impact, kind of like a role model. Just briefly, what was that impact?
It would be a teacher I had. I'm sure a lot of us had teachers that were really impactful. This guy was a Rhodes Scholar, is what we would call it. And he was a concert pianist and a choir master for the Vanna Boys Choir, and a German teacher, and an English teacher, and an art teacher, and probably everything else you could do. Not in the athletic world, but in that other world. And I got to see masterclass level of somebody doing everything. Yeah. And if you never witness that, you can't ever know it's truly possible. Yeah. Otherwise, everything to you is aspirational and you're always failing. But if you could see somebody actually do it, see them fall, get back up, see them wipe themselves off. He's playing Ravel's right-handed, screws up a key. I don't even know what he's playing here. But you could see the frustration, but he gets back and does it again. I now know that's what you do. You get back on the chair. You get back up, you go back in. You don't just quit because it sucked and you're embarrassed. And so I had right? Role models.
That's so good, because that's really life. You fall down, then you get back up. But also, I feel what you said was he was a comprehensivist. He was after the big picture. So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Episcopalian. Nobody knows what that is, including me. It's a lot of fresh flour and needlepoint.
Well, Cary, do you pray?
Is that Prey or Pray?
Well, you'll love this. You know what James Joyce says in Finnegan's Wake? He goes, "Let us pry." Pry. He leaves out the A and the E. So, if God exists, Cary, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
How about before I die? Why wait?
Now, see, no one in 40 years has flipped it that way. Go ahead. What would you
I'm
like?
not interested in afterward. It's too late. It doesn't do me any
Okay,
good.
what would you like him to say to you while you're alive?
I'd like
Oh,
him to
I
say,
shouldn't say him. What would you like God to say to you while you're alive?
I'd like God to say, this World War II thing and what happened to like 6 million plus. Oops, not going to do that again. In fact, I'm going to actually get involved and make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen again. In fact, I think I'm going to fix the air and water. I'm going to fix all of this stuff and then let you bastards know that the new 10 commandments are not about what you do with your genitals, but we're going to make it a little more important. It's about like existing on this planet and respecting each other. And I'm going to teach you how to do it too. I'm not just going to tell you go do it. Don't covet your wife. Well, how do I not covet my wife? Shut up. Just do it.
This is like, get him on the hotline quick, Cary. Okay,
Yeah.
do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I have come to believe that evil people exist. And I came to that conclusion during the Bush administration of the 9/11 era, and you're going to have people watching that have just like the vague memory of it, or maybe historical reference. But Dick Cheney, swinging Dick Cheney, there's always a Dick Cheney in the room.
Yeah.
So if you get a small island, you're shipwrecked. Everyone is going to, I'll do the shoes, I'll cut your hair, I'll cook the whatever. And you end up with a village, and people trade and get along and they gossip and all that. But that sort of self-regulates because they all know each other, and it actually works out great. And then you get Dick Cheney discovers the island. He comes up on a rowboat and he sees easy pickings. And he starts to build coalitions and gets these people against those people. And then pretty soon everything is for sale and he's the sole owner, and it always works that way. And we would do well to read, if we haven't read it before, Lord of the Flies.
Yes. Very good. So the hidden question really is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts, Cary. The basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, it's true. You do empower them. So let's say nobody's ever heard of Dick Cheney and Halliburton, and you don't ever give him any shrift on Bloomberg or CNBC or in the Wall Street Journal. He's not going to be likely to end up as vice president, get no bid contracts on everything on earth.
Yeah.
So that's what that kind of means. But you can acknowledge your enemy, but you don't have to. I mean, it just depends how you do it. What's your relationship with that kind of thinking? I personally don't want to keep my enemies close because I don't want them around me. I do not do well around horrible people. I get poisoned easily. I may be too sensitive. I don't know, but there's no enhancement. There's no life lesson that's like positive that I'm going to get, just pain, suffering, agony, and decay. So, sitting around a puff adder, sucking on its venomous teeth is only going to get you poisoned. So unfortunately, you just got to try to remove them from your life. But if you're in the media, going back to what you said earlier, Jerry, do you have a moral obligation to do the right thing? Yes, you do, because you have reach and access that the average guy does not. And he's depending on you to act fairly and give him access to that which you, for whatever reason, can reach. And so if you know about a Dick Cheney, we're just using Dick Cheney here, but if you know about stuff that's coming down the pike or that's happening, and you withhold that to do a Kardashian story instead on how big her fanny can be and how many hair follicles are on the up, right at the crack, and we're going to count them and look at the hair colors shifting as the heliotropic tendrils of the sunlight glisten through her butt crack. I mean, it's great stuff, admittedly. But if you avoid talking about what's in the water supply after a pipe just broke under a former nuclear trigger plant in Simi Valley to do a Kardashian story because you're going to get paid a lot for the Kardashian story, then you're a bad person. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Guess what?
Really well put. Well, Cary, two more because
let me just end.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
You can do both stories.
There you go.
You can do both stories. And if you've chosen not to do the important one, then you're an asshole.
Yeah. No, I appreciate what you're saying. And there's two other quotes I'm just hoping you'd weigh in on. Is Ram Dass said back a few years ago, he says, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. It's like fill in the blank. And the American Indians, indigenous, say your enemy's your best teacher. So, how do you handle that? We don't want to divide and conquer, like you said, Cheney did on the island. That was a great scenario you set up. But at the same time, how do you go, this is a human being, they're failing. How do I deal with them?
I have a kind of an easy answer for that. At least easy for me to say. Is it an easy answer? Does it even make sense? Yeah. I love people that teach me, as you're talking about, what not to do. Yeah. Because here's my syllogism. Oh, yeah. That's what it looks like when I fill in the blank. Yeah. So when you're with Mrs. Kravitz, if anyone even remembers a show called Bewitched, a terrible gossip and a busybody and nosy, or people like what you're talking about that behave badly, I can say, if I did that, I now see how it turns out. And how it turns out is they're not surrounded by a bunch of cool people. They're surrounded by terrified people who are probably forced to be around them to a certain degree, but everyone is on eggshells. Everyone self-edits. Everyone is not their authentic self, because if you are, that will be weaponized and used against you. So I love seeing these people. So I know that's what it looks like if I, become unsophisticated enough to think this is good behavior.
Cary, you got great critical thinking skills, and you got ESP because you anticipated the next question perfectly. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Politics. There's your answer. I'll tell you why.
Please.
Back in Europe, in the old days, and even in this country, when we were subjects of a king of England here in America, we sort of thought of ourselves as Americans only because we were here, but we were not Americans. We were all Englishmen. You could not just turn and say, the king is a lunatic, fat George, what a dick. Couldn't do it, because what would happen is your head would fall off your spine and roll down the street magically. So you had guys like Jonathan Swift, who gave us Gulliver's Travels. These were hidden messages in children's books. And he was writing about the king, and you had your Brobdingnagians and your Lilliputians and all these bizarre characters, and they were all playing people in the court. And it was brutal. It was thunderously brutal against the king, but that's how you got away with it. Opera was also the way that in the public, they could sing about the patrician class, the hierarchy, and the people in charge without naming them by coming up with fake characters. Same thing with Bill Shakespeare. You know, that's all he wrote about, was how vulnerable and stupid people in royalty were. And they had needs too. And so that's how you do it. And today, you know, you can't really, and it's different. It's not that the government censors you, but let's say you went on MSNBC, and we're going to assume everyone has seen MSNBC before. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but you're familiar with it. It is the inverse of Fox. So what Fox is saying, you just flip over to MSNBC, and they're just doing the same crap. So it's kind of unwatchable the same way if you're a thinking person. However, and I'm not talking about, they do some decent investigative reports, but generally speaking, it's just a bunch of slobbering guys with harsh opinions that are full of angry stuff toward another political party. That said, they have a glass ceiling and glass walls in which they operate. They can only talk about the Democratic Party as being good and the Republican Party as being bad. They can never start talking about, well, they're actually the same thing, you know. They really are the same. The Democrats are a delayed version of Republicans. Notice, they end up voting the exact same way, but they wait 6 months. And you don't even know what they're voting for. They're just delayed. It's the same party. They're on the same bandwagon. They're guzzling out of the same bottle. They're feeding off the same trough. They may have better haircuts. That's probably about it. But you can't say that on MSNBC or you're fired.
Yeah.
So,
Cary, a good example of what you just said was, you know what MK Ultra is. Well, sure. The LA Times isn't going to cover.
Let's help people watching who are younger.
Well,
it might be a hair gel.
Yeah, it's MK Ultra is Google it. It's a CIA mind control experiment that's probably still going on. So, anyways, LA Times will do a story about a play that's about MK Ultra, but they won't really cover it as hard news. So that's what I got from what you were just saying is what happens a lot. My question, Cary, is where's the tipping point in your career where you said, I'm going to be a journalist. That's my calling. I'm going to go into radio. Those two specific things. Like, what did you go high school and college to study? And then where's your tipping point? I'm going to pursue journalism and radio.
Well, you make it sound like I actually had a plan.
Well, I'm just saying, you don't have to.
I'm going to go with you.
Plan, but just sort of how did it morph into what you do?
So, in college, I was an English major, and I was an English major because I was lazy. Yeah. And my father was an English major at Yale, and he told me that if you're an English major, you can do anything. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you can be whatever. You're an English major. Like, you have command over language, and everything involves language. Everything involves language. So you can kind of pick what you want. And I thought, well, that sounds easy. So let's see. I read a couple of books. I write some porn. Then I can do some drama classes, which count. Take logic, which is fake math. And it was just standing around a keg in flip-flops and shorts. I had a really good time. And
what college?
USF, University of South Florida.
Okay.
I was supposed to go to Yale like all my other families since 1713, but my parents had a raucous divorce, and so I ended up where I ended up. But I got to be around real people for the first time in my life, Jerry, and I'll tell you what that means. I went to boarding school in Switzerland, not around real people. I'm around the sons of kings and emperors, and it's insane. It's all bullshit. And so I really had no idea of what regular people do. And I end up at USF, and I'm like watching Battlestar Galactica on Tuesday night with people and smoking things and just really having a nice human experience. And because of that, I was introduced, which I would not have been introduced to otherwise, to real problems in the world. Like
Yeah.
if you're not around that because you're living in the suburbs somewhere and everyone's lawn is green, you don't know anything about drought or starvation or people that would check a box called other, because there are no others in your town, are there? Ever? No. The gardeners even are vetted for their quality. So this was a really great experience for me. And I ended up doing talk radio, and it was on the right-wing Rush Limbaugh station. And I was raised by my father, which meant I was a young Republican, which meant I had no idea what was going on in the world, but I could parrot beliefs that I'd been spoon-fed. And I was doing all of that stuff. And I started this cable show, a local cable show called Hot Seat. And it was 20 years before Colbert would ever come up with that satire he did on Comedy Central, if you remember, where he was a Republican and would bring on liberals.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. I was wearing a Brooks Brothers suit, and I would bring on liberals, and I fell in love with them.
Yeah.
I had never in my life met stronger, braver people in my life. When I say brave, do you know how much balls it takes to stand in front of a bulldozer that's about to take down a tree?
Yeah.
That's not for weaklings.
No.
These people actually had what we're all told is good. They had principles. They actually believed in something and were willing to fight for it. And I was not seeing that in the Republican Party. People were willing to say they would fight for it, but actually none of them ever went and fought. And they would all find a way out and then exploit everyone else. And these people were not. They were self-sacrificing and doing extraordinary things. So from this talk station, I had been in 1995. It was the 25th anniversary of Stonewall, which was a famous march based on the beginning of the gay rights movement in 1960, 70, 69.
Right.
The day after Judy Garland died, and a bunch of drag queens in a bar were invaded by a bunch of cops, and the drag queens ran the cops out of the bar in New York City, throwing donuts at them. Scared the cops away. Drag queens. That's brave.
Yeah.
So my point is, I had gone to this 25th anniversary of Stonewall in New York City, come back. I was on the air on a big, huge West Coast talk radio station. And the news guy, who was from Texas, his name was Joe Allen, and he had a cowboy hat, big, like 20 gallons. And he rode a Harley with a shotgun hooked on the side.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't have the rebel flag flapping in the back, but it was close. And you could hear him coming up to the station. This is the culture there, right? And then there's me. And he comes in and he does a news report on this Stonewall anniversary. And I had physically been there. And I'm on a station. They all call themselves news radio, blah, blah, blah. And this is the first time I was an eyewitness to the news that they were reporting, and found out it was a lie.
Wow.
It was a lie. He did a rip and read off the news wire and said that the drag queens who had lead pipes were beating children in baby carriages. Did not happen. Trust me.
Yeah.
Did not happen. Totally the opposite. And so I had an epiphany on the radio live. I realized, can I support this or not? And so I quit on the air, which is a kind of public suicide that I don't recommend, because it's theoretically unrecoverable, and you will never work again in this town or any town ever again. So I said, the news guy said the other, Roby just finishes his news. I said, well, that wasn't true on news radio. It's like if you're CBS and you suddenly expose that CBS stands for cuckoo, brothel something, and it was based on a whorehouse that Al Capone owned, and it all gets exposed, you're going to really ruin their 60 minutes forever. So that's basically what I did. I showed that the whole thing was a charade, and I told them what had actually happened. And then I quit on the air, and we went to a commercial break, and the hotline lines up, and it's the operations manager. She says, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, I quit. I said, he needs to do she said, you have to stay and finish the show. I said, then he needs to do a retraction, go on the air and say he lied. Well, we're news radio. We don't lie. We made a mistake. I like, as politicians would say, he misspoke. And all this other stuff. I said, well, whatever it is, he's got to fix that, because in my mind's eye, I could see the black pickup trucks with the rebel flag in the back window firing up to go get even. And you know it was happening. And she said, well, we'll fix it tomorrow. I said, tomorrow's too late. She said,
wow.
So I quit. And I drove home and I was like a mess. I was shaking. And so I turned on the radio to see what would they be playing in place of me. And it was Rush Limbaugh on tape. Go figure. Which makes me just totally disappear. Yeah. So I went and I got just absolutely hammered, wasted, ossified. And the next morning, I mean, I knew I was dead. I would never work again. I'd have to go to the grocery store and bag groceries if I was lucky. Publicly humiliated. So really, I probably shouldn't be seen in public. So really, I may never work again. Next morning, I get a call. And if there is a God, if there is a universe, if there is something, maybe this is the definition of serendipity. I get a call from the general manager of the biggest rock station on the West Coast. And he says, look, our news director in the morning show is everything on a radio station, everything. It pays for the whole station, pays for everyone's salary. Sure, the afternoon guy is on there, but it's not his ratings that are pulling the station. It's the morning show. So the news director, a third of the morning show, is moving back to Texas. His mother is ill. He's got to take care of her. They've been listening to your show, the morning show. They like it. They're entertained. Would you consider being news director and a third of the morning show? I said, news director? I'm not a news director. I said, you mean I'm in charge of the information? Oh, yes. You're the news director for the whole station. I said, well, I don't know how to be that. Well, we'll throw the AP style handbook at you. You read it. Boom, you're the news director. I'm like, okay, well, now I know how news works too. Like, don't have to study it. Don't have to do anything, but read this book and you now have the credentials. So I went in, I became a third of the morning show, and I was in charge of all the information going forward. Amazing. So I found out that we were an ABC affiliate at the time, and ABC was servicing 11 to 1,200 radio stations a day. One guy overnight getting paid maybe $18 an hour gets these stories. He interprets them, writes a little slug, a little intro, a little soundbite, sends it out to all these stations, and like a bunch of lemmings, we just repeat it, regurgitate it, put it out there, and it becomes a truth for the entire nation. This is how we get our news. A guy who wasn't there, no fact checking, just takes it because some asshole from W blah 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 or K blah 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 sends him a soundbite and makes a claim. It's da-da-da. Here's what it means. That's it. There are no grown-ups anymore as there once were. There would have been an editor who would have looked at the audio, who would have had to check the story, make some phone calls, find out, is it true? All those people were fired because they cost money. Yeah. And the media is a gigantic cash register. So I knew that some of these stories were BS. And I'll give you a great example here, Jerry. Back in the mid-90s, there was a famous story of a black man who went into a grocery store with a white woman. Now, okay, cool, not a problem. It was a problem. It was in the South. And so he comes out, a bunch of rednecks grab him, throw him in the back of a pickup truck, take him out into the woods, douse him in gasoline, and immolate him. 70% of his body is burnt. Generally, you cannot survive that. Somehow he survived. And we got called into a staff meeting at the radio station, and the head of talk programming for all of Clear Channel, which was the largest broadcaster at the time. Now it's Cumulus and it's other things, but Clear Channel ran everything. They were the Rush Limbaugh, the Dr. Laura, the Glenn Beck. And we were told, look how our mic flag has gotten in the newspaper because this happened locally and we're there covering it. So I'm going to give $100 cash tip in cash to anybody in the news that gets our mic flag in the newspaper because it's great branding. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to like stir shit now. We're going to upset rednecks so they go out and do this stuff to get our mic flag in the newspaper. Yes. So that was the other realization. That was on the talk station, not at the rock station.
Yeah.
So I knew how the news was being manufactured. I went to the GM and I said, I can't call it the news, but it's the news. You're doing the news. I can't call it the news. What are you going to call it? I said, I'm going to call them reality checks. And I'm going to say, here's what they tell us is what's going on. But until we can prove it, I'm not going to claim it's a fact. I'm just going to tell you, here's what we know. And we ended up breaking stories. We scooped the New York Times by 6 months, doing sweatshopping stories on who was Regis, Kathy Lee. Sweatshop. She had a brand, did another one on a bunch of stuff. And we're scooping these major news organizations on a radio, on a rock station. Now, a rock station's news is not hard news. It's about as stupid as it gets. I was doing fucking Cronkite. I mean, it was killer. And we had the highest ratings in town. We were getting 8 shares during the news, and then they would go down to 2 shares during the music. Because I developed, and this is bad, but it's now normal everywhere. I started using film scores under the news to drive emotion, which is totally normal now. But I mean, I played it up, but I wanted to get serious stories out so that people would absorb them. So yeah, that was a
great history, Cary. And I know there's a lot more to go into, but let's go on that word truth. Louis Buñuel says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, everybody I've said that quote to for the last 40 years goes, oh, that's great. And then one guy goes, nope, that's bullshit. Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. And so it's the way you interpret Louis's quote. I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. So the cliche goes, the journey's more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important? So it's like 2 folded prompts, the Louis quote and the second. Any thoughts?
Yeah. So truth is truth. Like Fred shot Wilma. Truth. Done. That's it. She did not shoot him. He shot her. It's true. So it depends what you do with that truth. This is, I think, the unspoken portion. Is it used in any way to propagandize, to motivate, to take the eye off the ball? Then it's not really the truth. Then there's also the perspective. If you step around the corner and look at it from another angle, the truth then is the truth from that angle, but it's probably the same outcome. So really, in life and in reality, there is a lot of truth. But people want ownership of their version of the truth because you can actually make money at it now. The news used to be non-fungible. There was no commercial advertising during the news because who the hell's going to pay for that? It was valueless, and it was required by law by the FCC for mass media to provide the news. They didn't do it because they wanted to. It cost them an arm and a leg. They had to pay all these reporters to be in Vietnam and put them up and fly them there, and it was expensive. And there was no advertising because it was a must carry required by the law. They were just eating profits. And then somebody realized, wait a minute, if we we're getting huge ratings during this thing that we're forced to do. Why don't we turn it into a profit center? And that's how we came into the infotainment that we know well today, which you, Jerry, through your questioning, are combating and trying to make sense of.
Dude, what a nice thing to say, because I think what we've done together here is get a little deeper, because you know there's the surface things we can say, and we're trying to find like the hidden psychic effects of things like what Utah Phillips said, folk singer, activist. Anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Cary, who's entitled to make the rules?
Well, I could tell you who's entitled to make the rules: the people who feel entitled. They generally own what used to be called printing presses. They own the networks. They own the media. They own the power, and they decide the conversation. The Kardashians, as you can tell, I'm a fan. They are entitled to tell you what West Hollywood is all about. It's about selfies. That's it. It's not about dating. It's not about honest government. It's about selfies and sitting in bars selfies on red carpets. They are entitled to do that because they have manufactured a kind of celebrity and famousness that a bunch of idiots that live in that town where I live, the idiots that live there, I'm an idiot because I live there, that follow this stuff and believe it to be true. Why? Because the culture there is so shallow that you are a nobody unless you get collagen lips or do this and that. So your actual essential self is valueless. And you have been told that by the Kardashians, and you have agreed to it. So this is the part of personal accountability. The people that agree with those who steal the power are just as criminal as the thieves themselves.
Yeah,
So
well, this is interesting. That Cary, because it's all about the wording of my questions, because I've often debated or discussed with others, should I say who should make the rules? So let's drop the word entitled. Now, who should make the rules? How would you answer that?
Who should make the rules would be the people. Well, okay. It's a complicated question. One, you make your own rules based on your moral compass. We all understand that. This is not like deep philosophy here. But as far as public rules, the whole notion of democracy is so that you and I, as a group, can decide what is to the benefit of most of us. And then we send Timmy and Mildred up to Capitol Hill to execute that policy. They are the cleaning lady. The government is the cleaning lady. Its job is to fill potholes, put in light bulbs, and get the stuff done that you and I simply cannot do. That's it. So this idea that they're in charge and we supplicate before them and we need to be terrified of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's the cleaning lady or the cleaning man. She's the garbage man. She needs to do what you want, not the other way around. I don't care about her opinion. She's not there to offer her take on it per se. She's there to execute the policy of the constituents. And it's all upside down right now for all of us.
Yeah. Well, this is again how you anticipate the next question. You presaged it. You must have ESP.
I do.
So John Basil Barnhill, socialist, said, "Where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty." 2005 film V for Vendetta paraphrased that quote. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. So we're going to talk about the fear for a second. How do you personally handle false fears like the war on drugs? Well, on KPFK, they had a great government official once say, you can't have a war on drugs because drugs can't fight, and you can't say no to drugs because drugs don't talk. So you know what I mean by false fears. The war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on terrorism. How do you personally handle false fears?
Well, I actually think it's brilliant propaganda. If you have a war on drugs, then you can import drugs, you can export drugs, you can have drugs all over the place because there's a war on drugs. Whereas before, you didn't have a war on drugs, you had heroin on the streets, and it really stuck out, and it was a problem. And really what you want in this government is more heroin, more cocaine, because it makes a lot of money for the government. This is part of the black ops. I mean, you could call it deep state. I mean, whatever. But it is part of a background government way to pay for stuff with it being secret. So we do move because it's so fungible and it's so valuable. So if you have a war on it, you can actually do everything in broad daylight. If you have a war on sexuality, then you can have all kinds of proscriptions against it, but you can also up the game and make a lot of money at the same time. Look at the recent Supreme Court decision to take away the national right for women to freely choose to do what they want with their own ovaries. Now a woman's body belongs to the government of the United States of America, e pluribus unum. This is shocking. But it
Yeah.
is no different from ISIS. It is no different from the Taliban. It is no different from what's going on in Afghanistan, because what is the first thing every single government that wants power does? One thing first. They always go after women.
Yeah.
You take away the right for a woman to go to university. You take away a right because women are half the global human population. And once you can subjugate and subordinate women, everyone else is so much easier. I'm sure, Jerry, you've seen, and if you haven't yet, let me invite you to see The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
It ought to be mandatory viewing in every single school. It's creepy and grim, but here's what it looks like if it goes that far. And women are the canary in the coal mine. If we treat women well, then we have a decent place to live. As soon as women lose their rights, it is going down, and it's going down fast.
Yeah. Well, it's great you brought up the term deep state, because I just learned Peter Dale Scott, one of our types, came up with the term first, and then it got hijacked. But, I'm curious, what's the difference between rights and responsibilities?
They're really quite different. So I have rights under our Constitution. I have rights to exist. I have rights to say this and that. And I have no responsibility to do anything with those rights. I just have the right. So that's great. The founding daddies, however, did invite us to think about personal responsibility with those rights. So I have the right to bear arms, but I actually don't have the right to bear arms. That's not what it says. It says a well-regulated militia. And I am not a militia. Surprise! And a militia is there because back in those days, we did not have a federal military system. All we had were militias banded together to fight the dreaded British. And regulated back then did not mean limited, it meant supplied. It also meant limited, regulated the way we look at it, but it also meant supplied. And guess where you put your weapons when you're in a militia? You don't take them home, you put them in a armory. That's why it was regulated. So this interpretation from the late 1800s by the Supreme Court of that day that made us all believe that really what they meant was that we can just do whatever we want with any kind of gun we want, wherever and whenever, not true. So the responsibility was built into the rights by the way it was explained. But since we have a Supreme Court, they can explain Lucy any way they want. That's the truth.
Dude, I love you. You're very serious. You remind me of Frank Zappa. You're very serious about being not serious at times because you know how important humor is. So let's go into that for a second. You brought up Jonathan Swift, and he so importantly said a comment about satire, which I always use. And I asked a guy who wrote comedy with Robin Williams once. I says, can satire be destructive? And he said, now me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us. Some people think death is destructive, but he said, no, the job of satire is to be destructive. In fact, Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. Frank Zappa said, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else. Tell me your feelings on satire news. Does it more activate or more pacify people?
It's the only way. Satire news is the only way to get hard news out. When Jon Stewart was doing the Daily Show on Comedy Central that ran for a good decade, that was more people watched Jon Stewart on Comedy Central, the Daily Show, to get their hard news than they were able to collect cumulatively across ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox. They got more facts, more airtime of what was going on Capitol Hill, more minute-by-minute airtime of Congress talking on Comedy Central. So they had to use satire to get it out because the networks simply will not allow that kind of content to go out because it offends advertisers who want agnostic content. They don't want hot button stuff because you can't put your Buick Roadmaster next to somebody who's storming the Bastille. It does not sell cars. And at the end of the day, they only exist now to make money, not do the public good. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, because McLuhan loved to quote one of the original talk show people, Steve Allen, who said, "Behind every joke, there's a grievance." Any comment?
Well, yeah. Otherwise, it's not funny. I mean, you laugh at someone who slipped on a banana peel because if your mother slips on a banana peel, you're horrified. It is not funny. It's terrifying. But if it's somebody at the workplace, it's hysterically funny because there's obvious jealousy, there's competition, there's whatever that goes on in real life. So that would be maybe the easiest analogy to looking at why that works. Of course. And you don't come up with a joke about something that doesn't resonate with people in an opposite way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Gurdjieff said, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, if everyone loves something a lot and you make a joke about that, it doesn't work. It falls flat and you are humiliated. So yeah, they have to have some level of grievance or opposition to it. The counterpoint is what makes it funny.
Counterpoint is exactly what Gurdjieff said. Laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. And so I'm curious your thoughts on this saying, you create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, Cary, but like one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Back to Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So what's your thoughts, Cary, on this line? You create what you resist, or one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that?
You create what you resist. You also create what you're attracted to. So yeah. I wouldn't say it's limited to that one. I'd say it's limited to anything. Whatever you focus on, obsess on, you're going to probably end up feeding it into existence. Because unfed, when you're ignoring it, like the okra, it sits frozen forever, perpetually, hopefully in the freezer, never to be touched. But if I start thawing it out, laying it out on the table, somebody's going to make gumbo.
What's the difference between rebellion and revolution?
Revolution is the after effect of rebellion. Successful rebellion then can turn into revolution where everybody's involved. But rebellion is generally small form, often anonymous, sequestered, hopefully safely delivered. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. So, does punishment work? You know, Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, said if the criminal gets caught, do they think, oh, I'm doing something morally or socially wrong? Or do they go, wow, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day?
Yeah, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day. That's the problem.
So I mean, then when we catch someone, you know, like we know, I mean, the smartest guys in the room, the Enron documentary, I went up to the producer once and I said, dude, your film's just a training film for up and coming capitalists, because all they did is get a hand slap and put in a country club jail. So the big picture, just in general, does punishment work?
I don't know. The recidivism rates are astronomical. We don't punish, like corrections which is what we like to call it because it makes it sound like there's ameliorative behavior happening. There's something good and positive about incarceration. But if you just lock someone in a room, all they do is fester, get a bigger resentment, and they will get back at the punishers or the society that has removed them from that same society. So they may have been misbehaving before, but now they have a grudge they will never let go, and they will come back with a vengeance.
What's more important, Cary, conviction or compromise?
Are you talking philosophically or in?
Yeah, again, you put in the context you want, however you would like to answer the question.
I think both are not mutually exclusive. I think you can have both. You can have conviction, then go in, arm wrestle, come up with the middle ground that works for everybody, win-win situation. But without your conviction, you're not going in with any kind of backbone idea, plan. You're really not bringing anything to the table. So you need the conviction at least to go in. And then you have to be willing to find the middle way, which is only fair since all of us universally, our favorite color is not blue, and we don't all love okra. So I have to let you love okra as I unlove okra. That's part of my First Amendment, which ends where yours begins. And I have to be willing to share that little Venn diagram overlap gray space that goes back and forth. As I shout louder, yours moves back. Then you shout louder, mine moves back. But, we kind of know where to stop shouting, and that's the sport of it.
Beautiful. We got about 10 more minutes, Cary. This has been truly enlightening. Is perception reality?
Hell yes. I mean, it's my reality. What I perceive is my reality. It may not be mental health reality. I mean, you may not see it that way, but if I perceive it and see it that way, what other alternative? There isn't an alternative version in my head. It's just what I see.
Yeah, like Lily Tomlin says, reality is just a collective hunch. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I would say resilience has been, developing resilience has been a strength. So it's easier when you get punched, metaphorically speaking, when you fail, to just not return to the game, because then you can permanently and perpetually avoid further humiliation. Who wants to be humiliated? Hands up in the air. No one.
Yeah.
So it's just easier not to repeat that behavior. But resilience is amazing, because not only can you come back, maybe you don't ever do that particular thing again, but you learn how to do other things because you've made yourself available for a wider range of motion, or to at least pick something you actually really do like, where you're not going to fail as easily. So it's okay to say no to tennis. Really. I mean, maybe not in certain social school circles where you're required to play tennis to be a good person, but it's okay to not like shit and like something more. And that's where resilience lets you have a fuller experience, where you can actually be available to discover stuff you never knew was there.
Really well put. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
So that's a loaded one, because does anger mean acting out? Does anger just mean being quietly pissed? Anger turned inward is called depression. It's weird how it works. If you don't actually express or deal with your anger, that means you can't look for a fix to your anger, a solution. So then you go inside and you get bummed. And then when you get bummed, you get hopeless. When you get hopeless, you get depressed. When you get depressed, you can also get anxious. And now you're kind of useless to yourself and others. And unfortunately, anxiety and depression are biochemical. So you don't just snap out of it because, well, you just snapped out of it. You're stuck in it. And something has to physically change the channel in your head to change the chemicals. So anger is recognizing that you're pissed and then finding some way to deal with it. Maybe a conduit, or go help someone, or you got to channel it. I mean, you have to channel it. You can't blow it off because it will get you in spades as a collective punch.
Yeah. Cary, how do you find peace of mind?
I guess and I don't walk around with peace of mind. If I did, wouldn't that be great? I'd write a book. But I like to have peace of mind, and I have it often enough. And I think much of it has to do with you get what you give. So if I'm out pissing people off, kicking everyone in the nuts, upsetting people's lives, causing mayhem and misbehaving, and just being a general piece of busted glass and barbed wire, a hand grenade with the pin pulled rolling down, clacking down your alley of possibility, well, I'm not going to have an easy life. I'm going to have a big enemies list and a lot of pushback and no peace of mind at all. None. I'll go to bed feeling bad, feeling angry, feeling afraid, feeling attacked, looking over my shoulder. So you try to live as decent a life as you can, which does mean sacrificing a lot of appetites, you know, because we're human creatures and we do feel entitled, especially as men. We grew up in a patriarchy. It doesn't occur to us that we can't sweep into any room and take it over, because that's how we're raised. Women do not think they can sweep in any room and take it over. They get in trouble. Look at Hillary Clinton. Nobody seems to like her. Nobody. Yeah.
Cary, can you forget to die?
Do you mean that technically, like physically?
Again, you put in the context you want, because it's funny how people take that question. They literally freak out when I ask that question usually, but some people take it technically and some take it however they want.
Well, the only death I know of is the kind where you expire and the lights go out, and then maybe you get to go to God and he promises you the wonderful things we were talking about earlier. But death to me is lack of life. It's non-existence. So I don't think I could forget it. I could be in denial. I could, but it's larger than me. So I don't think I don't think I get to vote at the end, at the finish line.
Yeah.
I don't think my input matters as much.
Yeah. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in a few words. Who started it all?
Who or what? Well, I mean, without getting into the Big Bang Theory, without getting into single-celled organisms and all that, but once everything had evolved to the point where you and I had gone past Cro-Magnonism and Neanderthalism, and actually the human, they coexisted with Neanderthals, by the way, and they did the hokey pokey, which is kind of what we are. Once we started to get a basic social structure of, oh, look, you can trim nails. I can't, but I can make shoes. I think that's kind of where it all started, is the fact that we have love. And absent that, we're just going to eat each other alive.
Yeah. Second, Alan Watts, are we going to make it?
I think so.
Third, where do we put it?
I like to put it in a warm hole called, I'm kidding. I like to put it, where do we put, what do you mean it?
Yeah, well, see, now you're answering a question with the question. You win, Cary. That's what this is all about, inventing new questions. Okay, fourth, Alan Watts. Who's cleaning it up?
Whoever can make the most profit.
5, is it serious?
Hell yeah. Now more than ever. It's existential. But maybe not any more than it was in the Middle Ages, where you were a serf or a vassal and the Lord did not like you. The Lord of who, not God, but the landlord, if you will, at the castle did not like you. It was existential then. But now we've got Mother Earth in a very bad mood. Very bad.
Cary, I asked for 90 minutes. We got about 5 more. Can you go a little longer, or you got to go in 5?
Well, let me look at my calendar for this evening. Sure.
Okay, we'll go just a couple more bonus political questions, but let's do these playful ones before we get back into the hard news. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I wouldn't say anything because my 12-year-old mind was not capacious or evolved enough to appreciate any wonderful tidbits of here's how you can avoid mayhem for the next decades. I would kidnap the 12-year-old and move him to a new location and reinvent a life for him.
Nice. That is a good answer, Cary. I wish I could inventory all the answers I've got for you over the years, but that was really good. I love that. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
I used to be an under guy, but I got this toilet paper dispenser that has this kind of lid on top, and the idea is that the toilet paper rolls over and you pull it straight up and it cuts. So now I'm an over guy.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I already have one that's coming out. I'm working on it. It's called Nazi Finishing School.
Nice. They want to scent the glue and the binding. What smell?
That they don't get 80% commission like they always have throughout the years. We're going to have to do a 50-50 digital rev share.
No, I mean, literally, what smell would the glue and the binding be if they were going to scent the glue and the binding of your autobiography?
Do you remember what the smell of mimeograph paper smelled like?
Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
You'll love this. You know where I got that question is because when Madonna put her book out, the glue was scented with patchouli oils.
Of course it was.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Jesus.
That's good. Jesus, I like that. You mean the God Jesus or the TV series?
Well, I guess you'd want to
names. You're a great.
I would answer that for everybody and say you'd want that statue in a place where it's going to be useful in whatever your campaign is in life. So putting it in the middle of Idaho is never going to get me wherever I need to go, and nor them. What is it made out of? Well, I think Michelangelo was onto something. So let's use some high quality marble.
Very good. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good. I know it's good, but I don't want it, even though it's good.
Yeah, it's it's good. You never had it, but you never want it.
I guess let's just be crass and say a Tesla.
Yeah. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, if I'm up to my neck in vomit, vomit is chunky and thick, so I probably can't move. It's like quicksand. And if they throw shit in my face, I would just try to splutter and try to blow it off of my lips the best I could and blink it away. But if I'm already in that position, I'm toast. And
Splutter.
there's no PTSD that I'm never going to unhave after that.
Splutter and blink, man. I've never had those answers, but it's amazing. It's basically this woman on the Venice boardwalk once told me when I asked her that question, she goes, I take the velocity of the bag of shit and use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. And I says, well, that's the Descent into the Maelstrom by Edgar Allan Poe, which opens McLuhan's first book. He's saying, if we're living in sensory overload, advertising, why don't we use their techniques to get ourselves out of it? So it's I think what you've done is you've used the techniques of radio to lay out the truth, and I commend you on that. So here's a couple questions from Problema. It's a 2010 documentary where they put 20 of the great thinkers around a round table and asked them a couple of these questions, or I'm going to ask you a couple of their questions, which I thought were well. What is the most important unreported story today? You know, it doesn't have to be most. What's an unreported story that you feel should be more reported?
I think pulling the curtain behind the media and letting people know, because that is all people have. That is the only gateway into any reality. All reality, everything is tethered to a chip, a signal, a screen, and people have no idea what's behind it, who runs it, and why it's doing what it's doing. And I think a primer on that, which nobody will ever allow because it's got to be top secret to be able to pull this stuff off. But that to me is the most important story, because it's what made Goebbels successful in World War II. It's what Edward L. Bernays became successful writing his book Propaganda. It's what got women to smoke in public. It's everything. Everything is what you and I believe and how we get you there. Mentioning Chomsky earlier, as you did, it's manufacturing consent.
Yeah, it's a good reference to the Adam Curtis films have done that good. But McLuhan has a great thing. Study McLuhan is The Wizard of Us.
Yeah.
And it's the atomic dogs pulling the curtain back and showing you how it's operating. And then you can decide, you can form critical thinking skills. Here's a couple more problematic questions. What if all Chinese people want a car?
Then they'll all get one. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
The good news is, Jerry, that they're not all going to get one, because they have some of the finest public transportation in the world, the most beautiful, sleek light rail, trolley cars, bullet trains. And of course, we would think that because we walk on our knuckles comparatively in this country compared to the average European. We can't even wrap our minds around their infrastructure. And that also speaks to another question you asked earlier about the government being afraid. The governments in Europe are sufficiently afraid of the public, which is why they have all these services, why they have healthcare, why they have infrastructure, because the government knows, different from here, where your term is 4 years, 2 years. In Europe, it's 30 years, which means you are a dead duck. If you make a mistake and you screw people, you're in there and they will come and take your head or fire you. So it's a smarter way to run governments because it works.
Cary, how do we stop our governments from going to war?
Well, Smedley Butler, the famous general after World War I, wrote a book called All War is a Racket. And it has always been that way since Alexander the Great. Unfortunately, it's the Dick Cheneys and the Rumsfelds and the other ones that manufacture bullets. And maybe they'll manufacture wool, which looks innocuous enough, but it makes vests or flak jackets or sun shields, whatever. There's a ton of money to be made. And if you have enough money to shield yourself from that activity, you actually never have to see it, witness it, know about it, know about the victims, know about the perps. And you've got how many 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds that you can ship off to go do the Lord's work once you convince them they're doing the Lord's work. So it's a canard, a game, a charade that's gone on forever, but it is not taught in school. This, again, would be part of the curriculum I would offer, is how it works.
Yeah. What does courage mean to you now?
Courage to me means willing to do the right thing as you see it. Like your right thing and my right thing may totally be opposite, but whatever I believe is the right thing is to actually go do it. And it does not mean that I'm sacrificing. You have to remember, you can do two things. You can do the right thing and then go have fun. You can do both. And I think we think once we start talking about the moral compass, do the right thing, somehow it means, and therefore you will become Hester Prynne sitting by the side of the stream with your scarlet letter, miserable, washing your clothes over a rock. We're not talking about that. With all the joy and pleasure and fun and appetites you feed yourself, just make sure it's balanced with being willing to do the right thing at the same time.
Yeah. I love it. I have Stone's line. The truth as I see it.
Yes.
So three more, and we're out of here. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I love the fact that kids, makes me sound so old, the kids that are 10 to 16, and I got back from Switzerland last summer. I built a radio station for a private school in Switzerland. And here's why I did it. And this is where I see the hope. The reason we don't let 15-year-olds and 13-year-olds vote is because they're going to fix all of the world's problems. They're really clear. Really clear. They're not like ambivalent. They're not curious. They know. So we don't want to let them vote ever. We don't want to give them a voice. We don't want anything that they have to say to be heard by anybody outside of nowhere. So I built a station in Switzerland where they could actually start podcasting in a neutral country with people from all over the world and put out their words. And I want to do this for schools all over the world and especially in the US and empower these young voices because they have skin in the game. They're stuck on this orb for 80 more years with melting glaciers, inhospitable air and water, no polar bears. And you and I are like, well, it certainly is inconvenient. They're fucked. I mean, they have to fix this stuff and they will, and they know how to, but we do everything in their power, never to give them a microphone, never teach them how to use the microphone, how to be accountable, how to research, how to actually put out real stuff that is going to get them to the finish line. And I believe that's our responsibility. And I know they have the passion and the appetite. So it's up to us to hand that baton off, but not a half a baton, the whole baton.
The whole microphone. And I'm a huge fan of radio, especially KPFK. And I really appreciate you saying what you just said. Empower them with radio. It's not that hard to know that that's a medium that still is vibrant and important. So Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes, Cary. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Art or it?
Well, and again, in this case, the art of what you do is the art of radio, the art of informing people. You can put that word art into your calling.
Well, Admittedly, I mean, I enjoy throwing a turd in the punch bowl. So if you're a journalist, that's really what you're doing. You're upsetting people. You're
Yeah.
agitating. You can't help it because otherwise they're a fan of the Kardashians and they get to
Yeah.
live a proxy life through a bunch of slobs and they don't have to think or take any responsibility. But then their life gets worse and they're helpless to fix it because they don't have the basic skill sets, the understanding, or the reference points. So that's the job of people who are hardwired to be journalists, is to get the information out and try to find a way where it's palatable and approachable for them, and then be willing to go that extra level and help them out. So I create webinars that upskill people, that show them how to do basic stuff, that teach them everything from how does the stock market work, to how does the media work, to how to do a podcast, to how to find your voice, how to be resilient. And I enjoy it. So yeah, that's my perverse passion, is
That's
get off
beautiful.
on this.
You enjoy it and upskill people. What great terminology. I want to use that. And I think you'd love the two words McLuhan talked to Ezra Pound about, is needle subnabulism. So they get into this subnabulous state and you're needling them, or as you said, throw a turd in the punch bowl. So last question, Cary, and I hope this dialogue can carry on forever and ever. It's really been enlightening and I really thank you. What gives you the most optimism?
I like to watch TV. I admit it. I do get intoxicated on Netflix and Amazon Prime. And I mean, I escape in a lot of stuff. So that's a kind of fake optimism.
Yeah.
Because really what I'm doing is departing from the reality. But for real optimism, I think when you self-impress, when you impress yourself by doing something good, like these weird random acts of kindness that people talk about. I'll give you an example. I have a neighbor here who I'd never met, but the elevator stopped on the wrong floor and her nurse was standing there, who's like this little Latina, 108 pounds, tiny little thing. And she had to lift this big woman who I think had a stroke in a chair and couldn't do it. So she asked, would I help? And I'm like, I'm holding a coffee. I'm like, I got to go. But I knew I had to do it. I mean, I knew it was the right thing to do. And these are those little weird moments where do you do the right thing or do you blow it off? When you do the right thing, you actually get self-esteem by doing esteemable acts.
Yeah.
So I went in and I lifted this woman up. And I know you're supposed to lift with your knees, but I had to bend over and I fucked up my back, but it was worth it. And moved somebody who is physically incapable of going from A to B. And while it's a nothing story, it's like taking somebody through the intersection that's on a walker, you feel good all day. And then you start doing more of that because, yes, it's true. The payoff is you feel better. But you know what? You feel like you're worthy of living on this planet and you're not just a succubus. So esteemable acts are doing esteemable things, and it makes a difference.
Truly. Such a good description. You're very articulate. I appreciate that. Because the first question, Cary, is what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich says the best thing for a human being is another human being. The last question is what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun sharing this time with another person, especially someone who's so articulate and doing so well. I appreciate all your work, Cary, and I hope, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope our dialogue can keep carrying on forever and ever. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I will share it on my Substack.
Very cool. I'll send you the link very soon.
Roger that. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate your time. And if I had any final words, I would give them, but I simply don't, because this is not a final moment for us.
Thank you so much, Cary. Super cool.